The agnostic approach to truth. The agnostic approach is to take the following method when faced with a situation that requires judgment or action. Begin with uncertainty and doubt. Question everything. Properly define terms. Take a non-biased neutral approach. Look at the situation from all angles. Gather and validate the facts. Keep it simple. Make an informed decision. Begin with uncertainty and doubt. Question everything. Take nothing for granted. Don't accept because that's the way we've always done it or everybody is doing it that way as a valid reason to do anything without further research. Do not blindly follow authority without questioning. Do not begin a journey for truth by assuming that you already have the answer. Properly define terms. Imagine a group of people gathered to discuss social justice. Shortly after the meeting begins, there are angry arguments shouted back and forth and many storm out of the meeting. What were they fighting about? Why did people get so angry? Some understood social justice as promoting equal opportunity. Others understood social justice as socialist income redistribution. Angry argument ensued due to miscommunication. Ignorance is the greatest fuel of anger. How could this situation have been avoided? By properly defining social justice at the beginning of the meeting so that everyone was on the same page. Socrates was famous for challenging the wisdom of powerful men. He would approach a professed expert in justice and ask a very simple question. What is justice? Once a definition was presented, Socrates would challenge that definition. Often those being challenged would become flustered and angry. They were not used to being challenged by anyone. They were not accustomed to defending their proclaimed expertise. One who is a professed expert in justice should be able to define the term with the utmost clarity and confidence. Take a non-biased neutral approach. We are all biased. It's important that we recognize and are aware of our biases and work to maintain a neutral approach. This means we must clear our minds and start with a fresh perspective. Jumping to conclusions based on prejudice is not an agnostic approach. Rushing to judgment based on mob mentality is also not an agnostic approach. Look at the situation from all angles. This takes thought and imagination. This includes putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Expanding the view also means expanding the sources of knowledge. The more angles we use to view a situation, the more holistic the view becomes. This also involves gathering opinions other than your own to gain perspectives through someone else's eyes. The most valuable lesson I learned in high school was from an exercise in earth science. Each student needed to write down 7 attributes of a small white pebble. We were given 15 minutes to do so. Initially I thought this was extremely lame. What a time waster to describe a stupid pebble. Oh well, let's get this over with. The pebble is hard. Duh. It's light in weight and color, scentless and tasteless. I basically used our 5 senses of sight, smell, hearing, touch and taste to complete the assignment. When the time was up, the professor stood in front of a blackboard. We used chalk in those days, and went around the room getting answers. The other students did not have the same answers I did. How was this possible? The professor was filling up the chalkboard with attributes to this plain old stupid pebble. The students were looking at this assignment from different perspectives and therefore had different answers to this exercise. The light bulbs in my head were exploding as the world beyond my individual perception expanded rapidly. By opening the floodgate of senses and angles through human diversity, we expanded the identified characteristics of this pebble to include small, smooth, cool, hard, white, scentless, quiet, tasteless, rock, stone, non-edible, sinks, light, reflective, solid, non-porous, throwable, non-organic, mineral, non-flammable, old, water-resistant, abundant, worthless, useless, circular, rounded, lifeless, classless, sexless, patternless, eroded, strong, non-transparent, non-metallic, dull, pearly, egg-like, etc. If this many attributes can be identified for something as simple as a lifeless pebble, imagine listing all the attributes for every part in the whole of a plant or insect. Imagine listing all the attributes for every part in the whole of a human. If one explores all the attributes of a human from the pinky toe to the brain and nervous system, one will recognize that features such as skin color are extremely minute parts of the equation. It's important to look at a situation from all angles, as we often jump to the wrong conclusions by not getting the whole story or picture. Through looking at a situation from all angles and utilizing critical thinking, we discover racism and other forms of discrimination to be ignorant not only morally, but logically as well. Gather and validate the facts. Do we automatically assume something is true because someone says it is or writes it down? When NASA first started sending up astronauts, they quickly discovered that ballpoint pens would not work in zero gravity. To combat the problem, NASA scientists spent a decade and $12 billion to develop a pen that writes in zero gravity, upside down, underwater, on almost any surface, and at temperatures ranging from below freezing to 300 degrees Celsius. The Russians used a pencil. This is a humorous story and a good example of how a simple solution can save us from such an enormous waste of time and resources. There is only one problem. This story is an urban myth. Have you ever reacted strongly to some piece of information only to find out later it was an intentionally or accidentally false statement or claim? When there is a claim, are there facts behind the claim? If there are facts, what are the facts? Are the facts solid, or have they been distorted by bias, misunderstanding, or someone or some group's political or financial agenda? If someone is performing research, and the financial security of his or her own family is determined by one outcome over another, they are likely to find a way to conclude the theory that provides the financial benefit is true. Would you believe taste test results from a cola company? If the competitor's drink is served warm and flat while the sponsor's drink is served fresh and ice cold, how much is the test result worth? The answer, of course, is nothing. Facts must be gathered carefully. Do your research and identify trusted sources of knowledge. When people use an effective method and trusted sources for the obtainment of information, they themselves become trusted sources of knowledge for others. Keep it simple. In general, the truth is simple while dishonesty is complicated. Much wisdom can be stated in only a few words. For example, a wrong doesn't justify another wrong. This is a powerful moral and ethical statement and yet is only 6 words. Why is it important to keep it simple? There have been many instances in history where harmful practices were carried out without regulation. Regulation did come and life was good. The practices were altered in ways that protected and benefited the people in the community. Then something bad happened. Too many people became involved with the regulations and made them absurdly complicated and difficult to understand. The regulations began to fail as no one could understand how to follow them or enforce them. People gave up and resorted to paying and receiving bribes to pass regulation. In order to establish guidance that will be followed, it must be simple. Recently, the US government passed a bill over 2,000 pages. No one will be able to properly administer this bill. This is sheer insanity. The founding documents of the United States combined are no more than 20 pages without signatures included. We need to keep it simple. How do we gain oil independence, meet future energy needs, and stop man-made global warming? Nuclear power and electric cars. What can we do to significantly reduce obesity? When someone gets cola or diet cola from a vending machine, they get an 8 ounces container, not a 20 ounces container. They receive a single serving, not 2.5 servings. Simple solutions are the best solutions. Make an informed decision. Don't be one of the followers, be one of the leaders. Due diligence will lead to informed decisions. Informed decisions lead to better decisions and better results. What is truth? Is truth unchanging law? We both have truths. Are mine the same as yours? Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar, 1973. As the primary goal of an agnostic is to discover truth, we should have a clear understanding of what truth is. For the vast majority of our history, it was a known fact the Earth was the center of the universe, and that the universe circled the Earth. Despite the belief in this fallacy, past people and civilizations were actually much more in tune with the night skies than we are today. Of course, they didn't have powerful telescopes, but the general population could see the stars and celestial objects much clearer in the night sky as they didn't have all the streetlights interfering with the view. It was easily observed how the stars and moon would move across the sky at night as the sun moved across the sky by day. Why would anyone doubt the universe circled the Earth? For many thousands of years no one did. The truths we have now are from observation, perception, experience, what we've been taught, and what we've been told. Our truths are different in certain respects as we are different, our perceptions are different. Everyone has a bias. For the agnostic, the bias should be acknowledged, recognized, and minimized. Sometimes our senses trick us, and what we've been taught and told turn out to be wrong. The world is filled with misinformation. This certainly does not mean the obtainment of true knowledge is impossible. Someone once argued with me that the purpose of science is not to find truth because it can't. They stated that science cannot find truth, but only probability. I found this dogmatic definition of science to be absurd. The purpose of science is to find truth, and that is exactly what science has done on countless instances. The sun is hot, and that is the truth. The world is round and orbits the sun. Our sun is closer than the stars we see in the sky at night. To say that scientific discoveries such as these are not proven facts but only very probable theories is not a characterization that I subscribe to. Perhaps the purest form of truth can be found in mathematics because it is easily verifiable. Truth in mathematics: 1 plus 1 equals 2. 2 multiplied by 3 equals 6. If A equals B, and B equals C, then A equals C. If A is true, and B is unequal to A, then B is false. Take the following example: A equals Christianity, B equals Hinduism, C equals Confucianism. A is not equal to B, B is not equal to C, C is not equal to A. In regards to supernatural beliefs, which one, if any, is true? If A is true, then B and C are false. If B is true, then A and C are false. If C is true, then A and B are false. If after death we go to heaven or hell, then rebirth and the end-state spirit world are false. If rebirth is true, heaven and hell and the spirit world are false. If the end-state spirit world is true, heaven and hell and rebirth are false. Educated people of ancient civilizations were strongly connected to mathematics. They had to do math without computers. Think about the arithmetic that was involved in designing and building the Great Pyramids roughly 4,500 years ago. Finding truth often requires a creative mind to fit the right pieces together. The ancient Greeks loved geometry. Eratosthenes, 276 to 195 BC, was the chief librarian in Alexandria, Egypt. By using geometric equations, 2 sticks, distance between the two, time of day and measurement of shadows, Eratosthenes accurately calculated the circumference of the earth. During this time, over 1,500 years before Christopher Columbus, many educated Greeks thought that the earth was round, but didn't know how big it was. Eratosthenes found the true circumference by using 2 sticks. There are various methods for proving something is true. Mathematics may be the purest form but cannot be used for philosophical questions such as truths in morality. Other methods include the Socratic method, scientific method, the 5 W's, expert opinion, common sense, simplification, doing. Socratic method. Through examination, Socrates guided people to find the answers themselves. Socrates would ask questions until his pupils discovered the truth they were seeking. Imagine being on the stand in a criminal trial getting cross-examined by a prosecutor. You are getting grilled with question after question, and if there are any discrepancies between answers, you will be made accountable for them. This would be similar to answering questions under Socrates' scrutiny. The difference being the prosecutor's goal is to win his or her case, while Socrates' goal is for you to find the truth. Take an example of a speeding ticket where the police officer uses the Socratic method. Speeder: I don't believe this ticket is fair because other people were speeding. Officer: should I let everyone go as I can't pull everyone over at once? Speeder: I should be able to speed because I have a very long drive. Officer: so the law should only apply to people with short drives? Speeder: no, but the roads are dry and traffic is light, so I should be able to go above the speed limit. Officer: so the law should only be enforced when the roads are wet or by traffic conditions? Anyone who's witnessed a court trial has some familiarization with the Socratic method. In the 1992 movie, My Cousin Vinny, the character Vinny Gambini is out to challenge the testimony of Mr. Tipton. While waiting for breakfast in a restaurant, Mr. Gambini acquired knowledge of Southern grits and is going to leverage that education in his attack. Did Mr. Tipton really take 5 minutes to cook his breakfast? Is that the truth? What happens when this so-called truth is challenged using the Socratic method? Vinny Gambini: is it possible the 2 defendants, looks at judge, went into the Sacco Suds, picked 22 specific items off of the shelf, had the clerk take the money, make change, then leave. Then 2 different men drive up. Seeing Mr. Tipton shake his head no. Don't shake your head, I'm not finished yet. Wait until you hear the whole thing, you can understand what it is that I'm asking. Then, 2 different men drive up in a similar looking car, go into the store, shoot the clerk, rob him, then leave? Mr. Tipton: no, they didn't have enough time. Vinny Gambini: why not? How long was they in the store for? Mr. Tipton: 5 minutes. Vinny Gambini: 5 minutes? How do you know? Did you look at your watch? Mr. Tipton: no. Vinny Gambini: oh, you testified earlier that you saw the boys go into the store, and you had just begun to cook your breakfast and you were just getting ready to eat when you heard the shot. Mr. Tipton: that's right. Vinny Gambini: so obviously it takes you 5 minutes to cook your breakfast. Mr. Tipton: that's right. Vinny Gambini: that's right, so you knew that. You remember what you had? Mr. Tipton: eggs and grits. Vinny Gambini: eggs and grits. I like grits, too. How do you cook your grits? Do you like them regular, creamy or al dente? Mr. Tipton: just regular, I guess. Vinny Gambini: regular. Instant grits? Mr. Tipton: no self-respect and Southerner uses instant grits. I take pride in my grits. Vinny Gambini: so, Mr. Tipton, How could it take you 5 minutes to cook your grits when it takes the entire grit-eating world 20 minutes? Mr. Tipton. I don't know, I'm a fast cook I guess. Vinnie Gambini. I'm sorry I was all the way over here I couldn't hear you. Did you say you were a fast cook, that's it? Mr. Tipton. Yeah, Vinnie Gambini. Are we to believe that boiling water soaks into a grit faster in your kitchen than anywhere else on the face of the earth? Mr. Tipton. I don't know. Vinnie Gambini. Well, I guess the laws of physics cease to exist on top of your stove. Were these magic grits? Did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans? Scientific method. This is a logical method that applies to natural law with the purpose of gaining knowledge through experimentation. This method does not apply to philosophical questions such as what is the proper definition of justice. René Descartes attempted to apply scientific method to philosophy but was unsuccessful, for the most part, in making his theory popular. Each problem that I solved became a rule which served afterwards to solve other problems. René Descartes. While Descartes' statement is good in theory and very much true in its own way, many philosophical arguments are too elusive for experiments and mathematical equations to solve. The scientific method contains the following steps. Step 1. Make an observation. Step 2. Ask a question. Step 3. Formulate a hypothesis. Step 4. Conduct an experiment. Variables must be controlled. Step 5. Analyze data and draw a conclusion. For example, let's come up with a theory that would have been considered ludicrous and even blasphemous 1,000 years ago. Let's suppose the Earth is not the center of the universe and the reason we see the sun and stars cross the sky is because the Earth is spinning on its axis. This is absolutely an absurd theory. If the Earth was spinning, wouldn't we feel it? Wouldn't we fly and crash into something as soon as our feet left the ground? Does the Earth feel like it's spinning to you? What kind of a fool would come up with such an argument? Let's see if the scientific method can shed some light on this. Step 1. Observation. The Earth spins on its axis and that is why from our point of view the sun, moon and stars move from one side of the sky to the other. Step 2. Ask a question. Why don't we feel the pull of the Earth spinning? What effect does movement have on gravity? Do the rules of gravity apply to a moving object once it reaches speed as they do to an unmoving object? Step 3. Formulate a hypothesis. A baseball dropped from 10 feet will behave identically on land as it would on a large ship moving 20 miles per hour. Step 4. Conduct an experiment. We drop a baseball from 10 feet on land and record the results. The expected result is for the baseball to drop straight down. This is categorized as result A. We then drop the same baseball from 10 feet on a ship moving 20 miles per hour and record the results. This is categorized as result B. Will the ball drop straight down or will the ball be directly affected by the speed of the ship? Controlling the variables, the baseball must be dropped the same way on land and on ship. The wind conditions must be the same. The ship must be sailing on smooth waters. Choppy water and swaying could affect the results. The ship must be moving at a steady 20 miles per hour. Slowing down and speeding up the ship during the experiment may alter the results. Step 5. Analyze data and draw a conclusion. Both results of the land and ship experiments are the same. The baseball drops straight down. Once the ship gets up to speed, the forces of gravity behave identically as if one was on land. This would explain how the Earth can spin over 700 miles per hour. Speed depends on proximity to the equator, without everyone and everything flying off. If the Earth was to immediately stop, the surface would be completely rearranged, and we'd all be dead. It would be like getting into a car wreck going 700 miles per hour. The example I use ties into Einstein's relativity. Our solar system is moving 500,000 miles per hour around our Milky Way galaxy. Planet Earth moves 67,000 miles per hour around the Sun. When we are standing on the ground, our speed is relative to the speed of the Earth. We are moving at the same speed, and therefore from our perspective, we are standing still. When we are on a moving object such as a car, plane or ship, we are moving relative to the speed of that object which is moving relative to the speed of the Earth. Relativity can be used to clarify statements or arguments. I am a good basketball player. I will use relativity to clarify. I am a good basketball player relative to very bad basketball players. I am a bad basketball player relative to very good basketball players. Often people make a claim that something is superior or inferior. What is the relativity? My life is not fair. Relative to who? The defect ratio is good. Relative to what? What is the data source for comparison? The 5 W's: who, what, when, where and why. Mr. Green murdered Ms. Peacock by whacking her head with a lead pipe in the study. The murder was committed the morning of July 7 at approximately 7 to 8 a.m. The motive was money. The 5 W's are used as a method of prosecuting people who have committed crimes. Crime scene investigation, physical evidence, circumstantial evidence, and cross-examination are used to convict criminals in a court of law. Let's apply the 5 W's to God and the creation of the universe. Who is God? What is the universe? When was the universe created? Where was the universe created? Why was the universe created? Typically, how is also added to the 5 W's. How was the universe created? Expert opinion. Often we take the opinion of an expert as fact. An expert is expected to have knowledge and experience, making them a reliable source for information. If a great chef instructs you how to cook a particular meal, you don't ask if they are sure or scrutinize them using the Socratic method. You follow the instruction per the expert. In court trials, experts are brought in to validate or dispute facts based on their expert opinion. Often we use criteria such as educational degrees and experience to determine if someone is, in fact, an expert. Unfortunately, not all experts are created equally, and sometimes they disagree with each other. The vast majority of expert testimony can be treated as fact. However, occasionally experts turn out to be wrong or express a distorted opinion based on a personal agenda rather than fact. Occasionally, the credentials of experts are challenged. Once upon a time, the talk show commentator Oprah Winfrey had a child psychologist on her show discussing how parents should raise their kids. One of the parents asked the child expert how many kids she had. She didn't have any kids. After this statement, the child psychologist lost credibility with the audience members and was no longer considered someone with an expert opinion. An expert is considered an authority figure. An agnostic is not afraid to challenge an authority figure. I've known many people in my life who were once thought of as well-respected authority figures that turned out to be frauds, including members of my own family. These experiences strengthen my conviction as an agnostic. When in life, you find those who are supposed to be trustworthy in providing guidance lack integrity, you realize that you yourself must take responsibility for your own guidance. Common sense. For practical reasons, we can't analyze everything for the best possible answer. Too much analysis creates the dreaded paralysis through analysis syndrome. If someone falls out of a tree, they will likely be hurt. We don't need to ask experts or perform experiments, as we simply know this through common sense. Common sense is an ability some people have over others. It can be a voice in your head sensing something isn't adding up. It can be directly tied to gut feelings and observation. If you come home and someone you don't know is leaving your place with something that belongs to you, that someone is a thief. If home prices are growing 10% a year while income is growing 3% a year, the cycle is unmaintainable and a correction is inevitable. A U.S. congressman should read and understand a bill before he or she votes on it. This is all common sense. The comedian Chris Rock produced a skit on police brutality titled, "How to Not Get Your Ass Kicked by the Police." He referred to the work as a public service announcement. Although the intent is humor, the heart of the skit was common sense. When driving, if one simply pulls over at the request of a police officer rather than engaging in a high-speed chase that endangers lives, they are infinitely less likely to get physically roughed up by the police. Unfortunately, common sense is often ignored because it does not coincide with what we want or wish for. Often wishful thinking trumps common sense. Simplification. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you solve a complex algebraic expression? You need to break it down. Often we need to break complex problems down into smaller digestible pieces in order to solve them. For example, very few of us are intimate with the financials of the federal government, but all of us are knowledgeable about the finances in our own household, where many of the same rules apply. If you maintain a balanced budget, and your income increases while your debt remains the same, you can pay off debt and have more money on hand for buying stuff. If your income stays steady while your debts increase, and this becomes part of a long cycle, eventually you won't have enough money to pay the bills, and each month you'll be sinking further and further in debt, paying higher and higher interest charges. Like the federal government, your household can only maintain a certain amount of debt related to income. In a mounting debt situation, you need to bring in more money, cut costs, or both. The federal government works by the same principles, and so do large corporations. Why do some corporations go bankrupt? They accumulated more debt than they could afford to pay through income, or their income dropped substantially where they could no longer pay their amount of debt. Any business losing money every quarter cannot continue the cycle and stay in business, just as any homeowner cannot continue to accumulate debt endlessly. By simplifying a problem or situation to something we can all understand, we are better able to deal with the problem and find a solution. Is ABC Corporation corrupt? How do we find out? Do we walk up to a large skyscraper with the ABC logo on it and ask the building if ABC Corporation is corrupt? Of course not, as it is not a building that makes a corporation, it is people. We need to find out who's running ABC Corporation. Who are the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer and other top executives? Who are the members of the Board of Directors? Who are the Senior Vice Presidents? If the CEO and CFO are corrupt, then ABC Corporation is corrupt until they replace the CEO and CFO. If the Board of Directors are corrupt, then ABC Corporation is corrupt until somehow the Board of Directors are replaced, which is not an easy thing to do. If one Senior Vice President is corrupt, then ABC Corporation is not corrupt, but does have a corrupt element that needs to be removed like a cancer. By tackling ABC Corporation as a company, we can't solve the problem. By breaking ABC down to the individual people that run it, we now have a practical approach for finding problems and solutions. Doing in the movie A Christmas Story, Flick didn't believe that someone's tongue would freeze to a flagpole in winter. Despite this disbelief, he was hesitant in trying it out for himself. Unfortunately, Schwartz gave him no choice after issuing a triple dog dare. Flick defiantly touched his tongue to the frozen pole, and it did stick. Rescue crews were sent out to detach his tongue from the pole. Sometimes doing in order to validate a claim is not a good thing. The ancient Egyptians removed the brains of dead bodies before mummification. They believed thinking came from the heart, not the brain. How was this done? It appears mummification was a skill passed down from generation to generation. An exact step-by-step guide of human mummification does not exist, although we do have clues from tomb paintings and research of the famous early historian Herodotus. We also have documentation on how the sacred Apis bull was mummified. When it came to removing the brain, the popular theory was the brains were pulled out through the nose cavity with a hook. In 1994, Professor Dr. Bob Breyer performed the first mummification to an actual human cadaver in approximately 2,000 years. By actually performing the ancient Egyptian-style mummification process hands-on, Dr. Breyer discovered the brains were not removed through the nose with a hook. The consistency of the brain made this technique impossible. The hook would not hold onto the brain matter. It appears the hook was used as a whisk to liquefy the brain, which was then poured out of the nose cavity by turning the cadaver over. There were many other discoveries and validations made during this modern mummification. This is an example of how sometimes actual doing is required to obtain the truth in the details. You know more of a road by having traveled it than by all the conjectures and descriptions in the world. William Hazlitt: truth can be complicated, but have faith in the obtainment of truth, for much truth has been discovered through observation, scientific experiments, and philosophizing. Observing Earth's circular shadow on the moon during a lunar eclipse provided evidence that the world was round, as did watching the bows and sails of ships disappear as they headed for the horizon. We take knowledge that the world is round for granted, as each one of us has seen pictures of the Earth from space. The technology to allow us this benefit is actually extremely recent in regard to human history. We know the causes and the cures for many diseases. We know many facts regarding health and nutrition. We have gathered knowledge of ourselves as individuals and ourselves as groups of people. We continue to gather knowledge regarding DNA and evolution. We know much about our planet, the stars and the universe. We know much about plants and animals. Truth is obtainable, and with modern technology, we are discovering truths that people 100 years ago could only dream of. Will we obtain undeniable facts regarding the existence or non-existence of a higher being that even the most skeptical cannot deny? Time will tell.